Haha. Haha. Wow, Spider-Man's the best comic ever. Haha. This is so good. Oh, oh, I didn't see you there. Oh, look, there's a book about Cleopatra. Wow, that's nice, yeah. Oh, well, anyway, guys, I'll edit that out later, but how are you doing? It's already 2020, and are you ready for a wonderful, brilliant, amazing new year? Last year we looked at so much stuff. We looked at the pyramids, the Sphinx. We looked at how the Ogham was similar to the Khipu, and so many million other discoveries, such as what the bags are. And this year, we're going to have 10 times more discoveries. It's going to be amazing. Join me on this amazing journey of adventure. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And don't forget to check out the best ancient astronauts book ever, Confessions of the Gods, on Amazon. Hello everyone, it's me, and it's the first video of the year. We're going to start with a bang. It's one of the most complicated videos I've ever done. I hope I'm actually able to do this in one take. Otherwise I'll be very disappointed. It's very complicated. I hope I'm able to cover all the points. We're talking about the Sirius mystery. We're going to try and solve the Sirius mystery in terms of what the Great Pyramid may have been. And of course it does look a lot, I think you might agree, like an observatory array which is linked by an interferometer. We've talked earlier about, in a previous video, about how the Great Pyramid seems to be a perfect experimental setup for doing interferometry experiments, among other discoveries. Now, the Sirius mystery. The Sirius mystery is just amazing. It was popularized by a fellow called Robert Temple back in the 60s during the ancient astronaut era. And he followed on from work of two French anthropologists, Marcel Griaule and Germain Diterrain. And I've looked into these two. These two are not stupid men. They have many anthropological publications. They are top anthropologists. And they were in Africa in the 40s and 50s. They were living with the Dogon tribe. The Dogon said, hey, look up there, it's Sirius. Now, Sirius, as we know, it's a very odd, strange star because it's incredibly bright. It's as bright as a planet. I was always confused when I was small. How come that planet never moves? How come Jupiter's not moving? Well, it's a star, 8.5 light years away. And it's called the Dog Star. It's named after Anubis. Ancient Romans used to even sacrifice a dog when it rose on the horizon once a year in April. And the Dogon said to these two, well, do you know that there's a smaller star in there called, it's the companion. The stars orbit each other on a 50-year period. We know it's 50.1 years. They said, do you know there is a smaller star there, a much smaller star? It's heavier than iron, and it is very, it's invisible, but we know about it, and E.T. gave us this knowledge. And they said, oh, isn't that odd? And they made publications about this. Robert Temple picked up on this. He wrote the Sirius mystery. He said, there's a mystery here. And he said either it's E.T. or this tribe, along with another pygmy tribe in Central Africa, which somehow knew about the 8 or 9 moons of Saturn, which they couldn't have done without modern telescopes of at least the 18th century, or the 19th, more likely the 19th century, probably got this knowledge from Egypt. So this sparked Robert Temple's curiosity into an underlying civilization behind ancient Egypt and Sumeria, responsible for their rapid rise. This prompted him to do extensive research into Egyptian lenses, after which he wrote the considerably long book, The Crystal Sun. He then, in 2010, wrote another book, Egyptian Dawn, in which he speculated that the pyramids were actually of the era of 3000 BC, then hijacked by Khufu et alia around 2500 BC and reused for a kind of Stone Age religion. Interesting. Now, There's more lost knowledge possibly from ancient Egypt, and this is in terms of Gulliver's moons. We all know about Gulliver's Travels, written by this fellow with an enormous head called Jonathan Swift, an Englishman. And he said that Mars has 2 moons. And of course, the mystery was, how did he know this? Before the discovery of these moons in, I believe it was the 19th century or the early 20th century, Asaph Hall. So, how he got this information, we now know. It is from the work of Johannes Kepler, who was a Pythagorean. And Kepler looked at Earth, 1 moon. He looked at Jupiter, 4 moons. So he filled in the gap. Oh, Mars must have 2 moons. Venus and Mercury, 0 moons. So he saw a Pythagorean pattern here, and he simply filled it in with that. And Swift read this. He wrote Gulliver's Travels. He was a very well-read man. The question, of course, is, where did the Pythagoreans get their knowledge from? Why did they come up with this pattern in the first place? It indeed seems to be based on astronomical observations. And the suggestion has been put many times that the Pythagorean knowledge is actually a subset of deeply ancient Egyptian knowledge. And I myself have shown in many videos that the ancient Khufu period did not build the pyramids, and I would like to recap 3 points proving that right now. For one, the Egyptologists say we have papyrus of the pyramid builders. They were ordered to collect Tura limestone and ordered to the Giza Plateau. Now, all this proves is a repair, particularly as the Tura limestone was used only on the casing stones, and other limestone was used for the pyramid. Secondly, we know from carbon dating experiments that people were only able to collect mortar from the casing stones, implying that it is the casing stones that have been fixed up in the Khufu period, and not perhaps the interior, and that mortar does carbon date to the time of Khufu. Thirdly, we know from the collapsed pyramid at Meidum that casing stones seem to have been affixed later on, and I surmised this based on the fact that the underlying pyramid is all built on bedrock, but the casing stones themselves seem to have been placed upon a layer of sand, resulting in the collapse of the outerlying structure, which pulled down the rest of it and exposed the buttressed interior. For another fact, the fact that Snefru, perhaps Khufu's father, supposedly built 3 giant pyramids, almost as big as the Great Pyramid, and yet he could not, or maybe even a few more, and yet he could not have done so with the Egyptian economy. It is too much work for one generation to build 3 giant pyramids. More likely, he renovated 3 giant pyramids, and others have suggested this. So we have a scenario where the 4th dynasty Egyptians have inherited a bunch of pyramids in Egypt. And we therefore have to ask, what are those pyramids? Now, in the 19th century, people started to do interferometry. In 1868, a guy called Hippolyte Fizeau, who was a physicist and an optician, he realized that a telescope was a type of Fourier transform. In other words, a Fourier transform is a mathematical function where you take messy data and you put it through a formula, a set of formulas, you integrate it, and you get clean data. It's like isolating the spectrum of a star, and that's what a telescope does. It firstly zooms in to a discrete patch of light, and it then splits that light into a recognizable spectrum. And in a way, interferometry is a type of Fourier transform in a way, because what you're actually doing is cleaning up data. So Fourier transform telescopes is a new type of telescope which provides the most accurate images you can get. And when you place an interferometer in conjunction with a set of telescopes is how you can link telescopes together, and you start to get something that looks like the Giza Plateau, because you start to have a few telescopes, and then you have this array which looks a lot this line which is relates to the causeway of Giza, and that is the interferometer. And you have this light splitting. They scatter it, they bring it back together, and they see how the light has changed, and they take the waves and they analyze them, they convert them mathematically, and they use this to analyze the wavelength. That is what an interferometer does. A basic interferometer is essentially light put through a diffraction grating or through a double slit, and you get a more coherent pattern, but it's a diffraction pattern, it's rings. And what you can then do is you move a mirror, you see how the rings change, the rate at which they change, it tells you the wavelength. And you put through all these formulas, it tells you all about that light that the interferometer has isolated. So, or the telescope has isolated before beaming it into the interferometer. Now, I made a video a while back explaining why the Great Pyramid is indeed an interferometer. It's a perfect setup for gravitational interferometry. But could it be used for observational interferometry in order to explain the Dogon, in order to explain knowledge of, say, the rings of Saturn? They knew about the rings of Saturn as well. They knew about other stars. They knew about Alpha Centauri, and I can prove that right now. I'm going to recap a previous video. In terms of Alpha Centauri, we have two stars that look like the Sun, one slightly smaller than the other, white stars, and a much dimmer red star, 10% the volume of each. We see the same setup at Giza. We see two stars, we see two pyramids, one slightly smaller than the other, white with Tura limestone, and then we have a red pyramid, the Menkaure pyramid, 10% smaller. In addition, each of the two Giza pyramids, I've noticed, have a satellite pyramid. Satellite pyramid, satellite. Each of Alpha and Beta, Alpha A and Alpha B Centauri seem to have a companion. Alpha A seems to have a dwarf companion, which is invisible to us so far. And Alpha B seems to have a planet, which is Earth-like. And this could relate to the satellite pyramid seen at Giza. In other words, Giza itself was a type of knowledge. All the information, according to Arab legends, was incorporated into the Great Pyramid. I think, for starters, it was an observatory and interferometer designed to achieve very high accurate imagery of the cosmos. But secondly, after it fell into decay, it was intended to become a time capsule being built out of imperishable stone which would last forever. And as such, it would contain all the knowledge of the world. But in order to do that, they had to have computers which could place all this information into a pattern, and the computer would come up with something which could rationalize the information to us in the present day. For example, there's more information in there. We know it's 30 degrees north of the equator. They knew the size of the Earth. We know also I think that it incorporates atomic information. We know the proton is slightly smaller than the neutron, and then the electron is much smaller. We see this at Giza with the two Great Pyramids of Giza, and one is slightly smaller than the other. There is a great deal of geometrical information in there. There were scientific instruments discovered in there by the Arabs 1,000 years ago, glass that does not break, plastic, epoxy, resin, and which we use today, thermal adhesives, and there was also steel that does not rust, which of course, if it was stainless steel, would be very useful for its reflective purposes in observational interferometry experiments. So this is very interesting indeed. What interferometry basically does is it makes the information that a telescope receives more discrete. It turns indiscrete information into discrete information. Using interferometers on telescopes, we can start to see today features on stars, stellar features. We can see spots on stars far away. We can see planets. They're starting to use them to find planets around other stars. It's just absolutely incredible. But it is an interferometer that we need in order to do this. And Giza seems like a perfect setup for this. Now, with an interferometer, you have these tunnels to beam light. The light needs to be deadly accurate. It needs to be, it cannot deviate one of a thousandth of a millimeter over a few hundred meters. And the interferometers we use today are actually about the length of the causeways at Giza. The causeways at Giza are half a kilometer in length. And I'm going to right now rubbish the current Egyptological explanation, which is this has something to do with resurrection, because these face the rising sun. Now, if you look at a map of Giza, these causeways actually don't lead into the Great Pyramid. They lead to a temple in front. There is no way into the Great Pyramid or the other pyramids from these causeways. There is no door there. The door is on the north side of the pyramids. It has been suggested the pyramids are set up like observatories. Could they be observatories like the Lord Rosse telescope? In Ireland in the 19th century, an aristocrat, Lord Rosse, he made the biggest telescope in the world. However, it only has an azimuth motion. It can move up and down. And the stars, of course, move across the sky. So what you would end up doing is waiting all night to see a star or a planet for about 5 seconds as it moves across your view, and then that's it. So is the pyramid set up for this? It doesn't have to be. The telescope could have been outside, the interferometry could have been inside, the interferometry could have been along the causeway. What happens today is you have an array of, say, 3 different telescopes, and you have a set of mirrors which beam this information from all 3 into an interferometer. It goes down the tunnel, it goes through the slits. We then do the coherence mathematics. It's called correlation mathematics, autocorrelation. And I don't pretend to know how that works. It's immensely complicated. It's not just optics. It's another level of optics. It's very complicated stuff. But this is how the Dogon might have achieved their absolutely incredible knowledge, being partly refugees from ancient Egypt. So, to summarize with a full scenario, I think for starters, the pyramid was built as a perfectly controlled environment. You need a controlled environment for an interferometer. You especially, among other things, need to control the humidity, and you need to control temperature. You need to control geology. You can't have too much. It can't be on an earthquake zone. So you need a controlled environment. The interior of the Great Pyramid seems suited. The causeway, perhaps, who knows? And then I think they incorporated all the values of the world into it. The dimensions of the planet are incorporated into the Great Pyramid. We know about all those pyramidology ratios which are incorporated into the Great Pyramid. There have been attempts to rubbish pyramidology, but these all derive from the fact that archaeologists do not want to study mathematics or geography. That is not why they became archaeologists. That is the reason. Not because these are inherently wrong. Yes, a few people got these calculations wrong, and they are being used to tarnish the whole bunch of it, but that is not on. I think after it fell into ruin and all the knowledge was acquired, the pyramids therefore reverted to being a time capsule. By the period of the Stone Age, I think the pyramid complex of 3 times 3 pyramids actually generated the triple goddess or trinity religion that we see in the Stone Age, where everything is a trinity. In Ireland, we see trinity spirals inside tombs, and this spread around the world, and people started rebuilding pyramids because they saw it as some artifact of ancient times, of the war in heaven, of the fallen astronaut. And I think that is how the triple goddess religion was generated out of Giza itself, and it became a Stone Age monument. They might have buried people in there, they might not have, but that's Stone Age. We're talking about a different era to the high-tech age, so let's allow for that as well, although that does not seem to me to be the intended use of the pyramids. I think Khufu then altered the pyramids. We know that he altered the Sphinx. People are excited over the fact that the Sphinx might be considerably older than the pyramids. Honestly, if the pyramids were resurfaced and fixed up in the Khufu period,
I don't necessarily know if that's the case. It could be that the Sphinx is younger than the pyramids. If we're talking about a very advanced civilization responsible for the Dogon knowledge, and we just keep finding more and more information like this, don't we? I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to sub, hit the thumbs up. Next video, we're going to talk about the blue hats of the ancient Egyptians. Cheerio.
And one more thing, people. I was interviewed by this fellow on Forbidden Knowledge News. He's got a brilliant channel. It's called Forbidden Knowledge News, and check it out. He interviews 4 people a week. It's absolutely amazing. Check out his other interviews. He's a very good interviewer because he certainly let me yak on quite a lot, so he lets people talk quite a lot. There's me talking, and the reason I mention it in this video is the points that I mentioned in this are very similar to the points I made in this video about the interferometer and why the pyramids are so old. You know what? Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye-bye.